that's another thing that I'm always attentive to, like, what is the energy of this work? How do I want folks to receive it? And that has really shifted things for me, because I don't want to work in a way where I am always tired and where I'm depleted or where I'm rushed, because that energy, folks are going to feel that, you know? I want them to receive healing, the transmission of healing through my work.
This is Rebel Therapist, a podcast for entrepreneurs who are trained as therapists and who want to level up their businesses, make a bigger impact, feel fulfilled, and be very well paid. I'm your host, Annie Schuessler. How can you create a business that is truly aligned with your values? In answering this question, I wanted to bring on someone who has created a sacred and beautiful business so that she can share her journey with us. Get ready to slow down and listen to a thoughtful visionary who's going to help you think in new ways about your own business. Introducing Dr. Rocío Rosales Meza, a Xicana, Mexicana, mujer, and mother. She's a seer, energy worker, and healer. She has a Ph.D. in counseling psychology, though she's chosen not to pursue licensure as a psychologist because she's not aligned with the colonial field. Her path is that of a medicine woman in an apprenticeship with the Q'ero Inca Nation, learning with Don Alejandro Apaza and Marilu Shinn. Dr. Rocio's work is intended to help folks, particularly Black, Indigenous women, and femmes of color, decolonize their mind to liberate their spirit. This is with the intention of bringing us back to the times of harmony, balance, and right relationship with all of humanity and our Mother Earth. Dr. Rocio's work exists at the intersections of decolonizing, wellness, and spirituality. Welcome, Dr. Rocio. So good to see you.
It's so good to see you.
So I've been really excited about this conversation and just diving in with you. I want to start with hearing about who you serve right now.
So I primarily serve Black, Indigenous women of color that are empaths, that are intuitives, and really to helping them unlearn colonial programming, heal from colonial intergenerational trauma, and begin to be in touch with their own spirit, their own medicine. And so really it's wellness for Black, Indigenous women of color empaths.
What do your offers look like right now?
So I have a membership community, the Decolonial Healing Collective, and I feel like that's where I spent most of my time and energy and work. I offer teachings there, I offer energy healings there, group coaching, and that's the space where I spend most of my time, because like these topics are so big and they're, it's ongoing. It doesn't, while yes, I do offer one-time courses, it just doesn't always feel like enough, and so the folks that are really wanting to build community around this and are really dedicated to this work, that's my main offering. And then I have some online courses for folks that want to begin to learn about this work. And currently I'm doing meditations for folks once a month. And that was really out of a need because of the pandemic where we're in, and really just offering sort of a space for folks to be able to cultivate their peace and also to be in touch with the spirit world, which I feel is so important in this time. And it gives us sort of like answers that we need that maybe we don't always find in what I call the earthly realm.
In your community, are there kind of like different ways that people can engage there, different tiers or levels of commitment, or if people are in the community, are they all in kind of in a similar way?
Yeah, currently they're all given the same offerings. I've thought about tears, and maybe that can be something in the future, but right now this feels right because it feels, for me, the way that I do the work is not just like on an intellectual level. Like, yes, teaching and learning is important, but I feel like the spiritual piece is important. And that's really who my audiences and those that I call my community is, that we understand that we need both the earthly and the spiritual. And so for now, it feels like those pieces are important to the work, and to building community around that.
Okay. And so everybody who's in there has access to the same kind of work. Do you notice people engaging with the work in different ways? Like, what do you have going on in there? Do you have events? Do you have people having conversations? And then I'm curious, like, if there are some people who more observe and some people who are very active.
Yeah, thank you for these questions. So we have a collective distance energy healing. So that's one of the main spiritual pieces. And so, in that, as a Reiki practitioner, I do distance energy healing. And so, for folks that are new to that, energy healing cannot be confined to space and time. And so, we all set an intention for, and this usually happens on the new moon. We're actually doing one later today. We're recording this on the new moon in Aquarius, which feels very beautiful. And so, that happens, and we connect sort of in the spirit realms. And as a seer, as a psychic, I also receive messages and visions, and I share that with the collective, and they share their visions and their messages. And so that feels like one of the most impactful offerings of the collective. I want to say it's one of their favorite offerings. It gets folks really, the one that they engage with the most, I want to say. So that's one piece. I also offer a monthly decolonial lesson. And so offering teachings related to decolonizing, and also teachings related to, like, how do you decolonize yourself? How do you decolonize your life? And I think for me, especially, that's sort of the work that I do, because decolonizing exists on, and so when I say decolonizing, that's really, unlearning the ways that we have been programmed to exist under colonization, to exist as folks that are either in power or having less power. And so, as Black, Indigenous women of color, how we've learned, inherited to be inferior, to hide ourselves, to make ourselves small, to doubt, right? Like a lot of doubt, and to be in servitude to other people. And so the lessons that I teach are at those intersections of the decolonizing work. What does that mean? But also, how do you do this in your life so that you can begin to feel more, really, for the healing to happen, to allow more space around that.
Do you notice choices that you make around the way that you run the community, the way that you run your business, where you feel like these are choices that I'm making that are kind of modeling that ethic? These are like conscious ways I'm doing this or I'm not doing that in order to be that way.
Yes, for sure. So there's the healing, there's the teaching, and then I have a community call where it's really their relationship building, and then guidance call where they come to get group coaching from me. And so all of that was built very intentionally. And so yes, it's always at the forefront of any work that I do. Is this in alignment with decolonizing? Is this alignment with doing sacred work? Is this also in alignment with me? Like, is this something that I want to do, that I feel called to do? And so and then also, like, does this make space for my life as a mom? As a mom, I unschool my child. And so, like, those are all the main questions that I carry. Is it in alignment and with the work, and also myself? And so that's a different approach, I want to say, right? Because I think often when we think about our work or business, like we think about just the work, right? And like it's almost like unconscious of the way it, like, let me build this thing, but we don't think about how does this impact me? And really, like, what is the energy of this work? I think that's another thing that I'm always attentive to, like, what is the energy of this work? How do I want folks to receive it? And that has really shifted things for me because I don't want to work in a way where I am always tired and where I'm depleted or where I'm rushed, because that energy, folks are going to feel that, you know? I want them to receive healing, the transmission of healing through my work. And so those, yes, those are things that I'm always conscious of and mindful of. And it's a constant, I want to say it's like a constant dance, and it's a constant, almost like interrogation, like, yes, this, this offering, but how can I do it in a way that creates accessibility? How can I do it in a way that's decolonial? How can I do it in a way that's spiritual? And does it make room for me and my family?
When you are in your community, okay, so let me back up. Whenever I see you, I feel like you're shifting the energy of the place that you are. And so one place that I see you is on Instagram. And I always feel like you're shifting and slowing down the energy. And I'm wondering, in your community, is that easier than it is on Instagram? Or like, is there a different kind of energy that you need to bring to those different spaces?
hmm Yes, I love this question. And so, yes, I think that's like part of my work is the way that I live, you know? And so, yes, like that's the energy that I try to bring to folks. And so, thank you for receiving that in that way. I think it has to be in alignment for folks to receive it. And yes, that's also in the way that I operate with the collective, because we have the offerings, but also what one of the main teachings is like, can you embody this, right? Can you embody this? And this is the tricky part, is that folks that are newer to the community, they often feel like guilty that they can't keep up with things sometimes, like that they didn't show up to the calls. And so there's so much unlearning and coaching and holding space that I have to do around that, because they feel like I'm, quote unquote, falling behind. And again, it's all the colonial programming. I'm falling behind. I think they also feel like they're disappointing me. And so it's a constant, gentle reminders that I share with them that you are not on anyone's time but your own. And this is your specific journey. And these offerings will meet you in the way that you need. And so then it's the unlearning, and then it's the trust with spirit that this will come to you when it needs. And so there is initially that tension, because that conflict of I've not been taught to do these things, and so I feel guilty and I do feel behind. And so there is that holding space and gentle reminders around that.
Mm. And what about on Instagram? How do you slow down or bring the energy that you want in a space like Instagram?
Oh, yes, that's such a good question, because Instagram or social media in general, right? It's so fast paced. And so, and then this is in so much conflict with decolonial work, right? Because the sense of urgency is rooted in the colonial capitalist patriarchy of feeling like we always have to be on, or feeling like we have to do things right now. And I too have had to unlearn that. Like, I'm not always, I feel that energy too, especially as a person that's highly sensitive that used to be in academia. I've had to do a lot of unlearning around that. And for me, it's my body always reminds me. The reason why I left academia is because I had a health collapse. And so my body is my teacher with that. And so when I feel like the energy is too much, I disengage. And it just takes I want to say a lot of discipline, a lot of courage, a lot of energetic boundaries to be in that space intentionally. Because it's so easy, like, there's people out there to say post 3 times a day and engage with all the comments and be in all the DMs and engage with other people all day in their platform. And I don't do all of that. I do that when I have the energy for it, when I feel called, but I just show up in how I am called and what I have energy for. And I know that a lot of people don't do that, but for me, again, it's about being in alignment.
Mm-hmm. And you have a lot of followers. And so I'm imagining that you could never give as much as people are probably asking of you.
Mhm, mhm.
How do you manage that? Like, how do you set boundaries or kind of step away? How do you kind of manage that people want more from you than you have time to give?
Yes. Yes. And so as like a recovering empath that had zero boundaries, that was really hard for me initially because it's funny, of course, all our patterns of healing show up in different ways. I learned to set boundaries in my personal relationships, and then like this Instagram community became its whole entity where I didn't have those boundaries, where I felt like this is a whole nother responsibility that I have. And these are people that are in need, and I felt that need to be able to serve. And so it did take a long time, I want to say, for me to get to the place where I am setting boundaries. I just found myself getting drained and frustrated that I couldn't, there is no way that that you can help anyone if you have followers beyond, I want to say, like, even 20 people. Like, it's impossible to always be on. And so I really just have to remind myself, like, I can only do so much. And really, me being on all the time, that's unrealistic. And I can't really serve intentionally in that way. So it's constant reminders, and it's checking in with my energy.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I know for me, I have a kind of a practice of when I open up my office for the day, my computer for the day, that the first place I go is to my community to check in on people and to like give feedback where people have asked for it. And I do that first because it feels like it's the most important. And then it also feels like it's the most, like I want to have the freshest energy for it. And I tend to have that the most in the morning. And I'm wondering for you, do you have practices or rituals that you find keep you focused in the ways that you want to be focused?
Yes, and it doesn't involve the work like a computer or a
Mhm.
phone.
Mhm.
And I had to unlearn that. And so my I'm in an apprenticeship learning earth medicine with the Q'ero Inca Nation. And so really it's my drumming, meditation, connecting to Mother Earth, being outside and touching the land, calling in the directions and feeling the wind, the birds, connecting with them, or whichever animal allies show up. That really reinvigorates me and gives me a sense of purpose, reminds me why I'm here. And that, yes, the work is a part of that, but it's not the entirety of it. And I think that's so important for me because as someone who was trained in academia, there's a part in my brain in the subconscious that I'm still sort of unlearning. But those for me are what really help me to not only stay grounded, but to be full of energy and to be intentional with my energy.
Beautiful.
Mhm.
So, how much time do you spend in your programs right now? Like in the worky work part of things, how much time do you spend?
Hmm, that's a good question. And I don't know if I have an answer because I don't. So maybe this is a growth area for me, but unless I sit and look at my schedule, of course, I plan my schedule and I'm intentional with time, and I have to coordinate with my husband and for caring for the little one, especially in the pandemic because we don't have help. And so I know that, but I don't really like think about that all the time. And so I know that I at least the like our calls are typically 2 hours. Sometimes we go over, and we have at least three of those, and then we have the virtual space where folks share. And so I don't have a set amount of time. It's really what comes up. And I think that's the other piece about my work is that what I've learned is what helps me to show up is that it's not so rigid, because doesn't, the rigidity stresses me out and I'm not able to show up in the same way. And so what helps me is to be able to have space and to show up in the way, yes, we have a structure. These are when the calls are, and these are the dates for it. This is the container. But then within that, to allow fluidity around it. And that makes me feel more at peace, and I'm able to show up for them. And I think that's helpful also for them because, especially in the work we do, decolonial and spiritual, like you can't contain that. It's almost like, the opposite of what we should be doing. Like we're unlearning to, you know, where our minds are imprisoned, and we're unlearning to do that. And so there does need to be that fluidity for that to happen, right? And that's the embodiment of the work. And I get a lot of questions from the community about, like, how do you do that? People I think because of our colonial programming and capitalist programming, it feels like, I don't know, people look at me like I'm a unicorn or something when I share those things, because I think they're so used to the rigidity, that they don't see another way to do things. And so for me, it's really about modeling that, but also doing what feels right in my body, and knowing that this is part of the work.
We'll get back to Dr. Rocio in just a moment. First, I want to tell you about Create Your Program. This is for you if you're a therapist or a healer and or a coach, and you want to expand beyond a traditional private practice. Over 5 weeks, you'll create a pilot program and launch it to the world. That sounds like a lot to do in 5 weeks, and it absolutely is. But I'll walk you and a small group of innovative and open-hearted entrepreneurs through it step by step together, and you'll get tons of my support in the process. Apply now by heading over to rebeltherapist.me/create. Okay, let's get back to Dr. Rocio. You were saying earlier when people first join your community that they can be kind of hard on themselves and having this idea of, I'm not keeping up, and there's an up to be keeping with. And then also, it sounds like maybe when people join at first, they're having expectations of you that are a little bit different than what they later step into, of like how it's going to look or what you're going to give them.
Mhm. I think I'm pretty clear about, there's definitely that judgment that they do of themselves, and we do so much work around that. And it hurts my heart, honestly, like when they share that. And then I'm like, of course that would come up, because we're so indoctrinated to like always be on a schedule, and it has to happen in this certain way. So even when we say we want to do this work, of course that would show up. And so it just hurts my heart, but I know that it's a part of it, right? It's a part of the unlearning. And so I know, to make space for that, and for them not to feel, the other piece of that is for them not to feel shame for saying those things. Because I think that's another piece, that they feel shame, like I am behind and now I'm saying it, like, and I used to see this actually with my students as a professor, like they felt like that they're creating an excuse for not keeping up. And it's like, oh, even saying that right now, like it hurts my heart. Like we are so hard on ourselves. And of course, like we've learned to be that. Like we've been so exploited, right? Like we don't allow space for our humanity. And when folks extend that humanity, we feel like we're creating an excuse, you know? It's so painful to see that show up. But in terms of how I show up, I think I'm pretty clear with folks of like, this is how I do things. And I think it helps them. It helps them to show up. And I even say, like, sometimes I might be a few minutes late, and that's because I have a little one. And sometimes that just happens. Like, I can plan everything, and then the little one shows up right before, like, and so I'm very open about those things. And some people might say that's unprofessional, but for me, and I think that's where the courage comes in. It's like, I can't show up any other way. This is how I can do the work. And I know that every time I share things like that, it creates space for them. They say thank you, because then they can do that too.
I love that. And now we get to decide what it means to be professional. You know,
Yes,
what it
yes.
means that we believe in and what it means that we just aren't going to play anymore.
Yes. And this is what I love about this time we're in, that everything is literally on the table, and we're seeing it for what it is, and we're like changing our agreements, right? Like, I don't agree with this. This does not feel in alignment. This is actually destructive for me and my family. I don't want to participate in this anymore. And so that's what I love about this time, is like there's so much awakening. There's so much also permission for people to do things differently and to create new ways of being.
Mm, yes. You mentioned to me that you had to let go of everything non-essential in 2020.
Yes.
I'm wondering if that, in addition to everything we've been talking about, if that reshaped things in any ways that you ended up seeing a benefit in.
Yes. So 2020 has been wild, especially as a parent, as a mother. It's been hard. Like there's moments that have been hard. I know a lot of parents that have had really tough days. And so that is what made me like, okay, I need to scale down even more of like, what do I really have the capacity for, especially in this time? I thought that things maybe I would be able to do more, and I can't because my child needs me more. And so I caught myself saying that more often. I can't do this because of my little one. And then I realized, like, you know what? I just need to, any extra things, I'm going to say no to, because I just don't have the capacity right now. I could maybe push myself and do them, and then I'm going to be tired, and then I'm going to be frustrated with my child. And so it really, I feel like 2020 was an opportunity for us, if we took it, and we still have the ability to do that now, of like, what are the things that are really, really important for you? And prioritizing those things. And then how do you want to do those things so that you can be well, and so the people around you can be well, and the work that you do can have an impact. Like, we don't have to be on the hamster wheel all the time, you know? We don't always have to be putting things out all the time. You know, we can just be. And for me, at least, that's what 2020 was about.
Mm, yeah. God, I feel like I could cry just hearing that example that you gave of how true that feels. Like, I'll say yes to something, I'll feel resentful, and then it'll come out in the way that I talk to my child or the way that I feel toward my child. That is so deep.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I think the parenting piece has been coming through a lot for folks in 2020 and this year. I think a lot of parents, when they hear me say that, like, they really resonate with that. And I think it's because we don't realize, and so I want to make space here that there is a level of privilege here. I have the social class privilege to be able to say no to some things. But someone like my mom, who was working class and she was a single mom to 3 girls, she wouldn't have that opportunity, right? And so, yes, there's a level of social class privilege there. And also, I think a lot of parents realize that they've they really sacrificed their time with their children because we think we have to do work in a certain way, or we even think like we have to make a certain amount of money that we realize maybe we don't even need that, right? Or like, I'm making that, and what is the cost of making that money? And so for me, again, like, those are the questions that I always ask myself. Like, I'm so discerning with how I use my time and energy. And for me, number one, can I be well doing this? And then if I do this, it's taking time away from my child. And so, what am I going to say yes to? What am I going to say no to? And so for me, I prioritize my child and myself instead of the work, because I don't want my child to have the leftovers, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I got into a conversation with one of my best friends last week where I caught myself saying, oh, like, I can't get some of the things done this week that I really want to get done, because of parenting. And then I was like, wait, hold on. That's not actually how this works in my case. Like, I've actually set up my life so that I work very little so that I get a lot of time with my kid, and that, like you were mentioning, that's a huge privilege. And yet it then there are these habits of thinking like, I don't have enough time. It's like, yeah, that's right, Annie, because you set it up that you would have the right amount of time. So,
Mhm, mhm. Yes, it is so much unlearning, like, deep-seated patterns. I catch myself all the time too, and this is the piece where, like, I'm okay if people think I'm unprofessional because I only have so much energy. Like, I know if I push myself and that's the pace that I keep going, I'm gonna go back to where I was, where I have another health collapse. And I may not even, I couldn't even take care of myself and I couldn't take care of my child. And there's no way that I'm going back to that time again. And so I catch myself, there's times where I catch myself and then I remind myself, okay, I'm going to do this. I only have so much energy. I'm tired right now and I'm going to rest instead of answering those emails. I'm going to rest instead of finishing this project in the timeline that I wanted to finish it. It could actually wait, and I'm going to rest because I need to be well. And I learned that the hard way. I exploited my body to get a PhD, to get tenure, and then I had a health collapse. So for me, I just know in my body I can't keep doing that.
what are you really excited about in 2021 and beyond?
I am excited that so many people are waking up, because there was a time my work was really controversial, and there was few folks that were hearing me and getting it. And I feel like sometimes my guides like just like keep wanting me to push the envelope, and I'm like, can I just be comfortable here? People are getting this, so can I just stay here? But I keep, they keep pushing me. But that excites me that more people are getting the importance of decolonizing. They're getting that we don't have to accept things the way that they are. And even like with work, like that I don't have to make that the priority, that I can allow space for me, that I even feel good doing this, right? Do I even want to keep doing this work? Right? Like, let me not be on autopilot. Do I even want to do these things? That excites me so much because then I think of like I literally see the energy that becomes available for doing things in a different way. And so it really does feel like they're unplugging. And now it's like all this available energy to create the new world, the better world, a more just world, a world where we are in alignment and right relationship with each other, with our Mother Earth. Like that's what really excites me.
Beautiful. Thank you. I'm pausing here because I'm like, there's one more thing I want to ask you, and I'm trying to decide if it should be in the interview or if it should be out of the interview. But I'm wondering if you have a resource that comes to mind in terms of, I can't remember if you used the word unschooling or not, but of the way that you're schooling your or unschooling your child.
Yes, I do have a resource. I want to say that, so my child is 4.5, and I do things in sort of an unconventional way. I don't really have like a curriculum that my child is following, especially in the pandemic. Like maybe before the pandemic, I thought maybe I'll look into a curriculum and try to do that. And then 2020 happened. I was like, there's no way that's happening right now. Let's just be well and is everyone healthy? And so really that's what I make room for. Like, are we happy? Can we have fun? Is my child happy? We learn, we teach a lot of like co-regulation, and those are the things that are important. Connecting to the land, drumming, like all the sacred or indigenous ways. But in terms of like school, we don't really do a lot of that. We only do what I follow the child. That's sort of what I follow, if anything. And so reading is big in our family, but anything besides that, it's like, does my child want to do that? And I know that's a really different way of being, but especially in a pandemic, it's like we only have space for so much. And for me, what I'm prioritizing is if we're happy and we're well, because we can get so stressed easily and then no one's happy, and then it's all the things, right? Like you're short with people, you're impatient, then yelling, like, and that's just not, I don't think that's the time for it right now. I think for me, especially from a spiritual perspective, I don't think school, like there's a reason why schools are out, I feel, because it's time for us to really connect, and make space for that. What really helps me to shift my parenting is raising free people on Instagram. Akila Richards, she does amazing work.
Yeah. Do you listen to her podcast?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, she's amazing. And she also has a book out. And so any parent that really resonates with that, I think she really helps us to create that shift.
Well, thank you so much for answering that. It feels like there's such a connection between our choices as entrepreneurs and our choices as parents about
Yes.
being self-directed,
Hmm.
paying attention to our rhythms. And so I really appreciate you speaking a little bit to that.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And so I say like my body is my greatest teacher, but also my child, because there are things that I still do unconsciously because I've been in the school system for like 30 5 years, right? Like, of course, it's going to take me time to unlearn. And then, my child will say, like, Mami, no quiero hacer eso. I don't want to do that, Mami. And like, you know what? You're right. Or, Mami, don't tell me that. You know what? You're right. I should not, And so they're my greatest teacher to really like completely, decolonizing, unlearning authority, right? Like really making space for them. And so, yeah, I so agree that there is such a deep connection to work and parenting. And I think any parents that are listening, what I want them to maybe reflect on is like that maybe you don't have to do all the work things. Like maybe begin to reflect on that. Like, what do I really have to do? And then how can I create more space for myself, more space for my child? So that I'm not always feeling overwhelmed. Because I think I hear that a lot, especially for mothers that are entrepreneurs. And I so get that. There are moments like that. But I think it's because we feel like we have to do all the things, right? Like even Facebook, Instagram, Clubhouse, like all these things, right? YouTube, and then I have to do a podcast, and then I have my mailing list, and like, do you really have to do all of that? What is it that you want to do? And what are you available for? Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rocio. This has been
Of course.
a delicious conversation, as I knew it would be.
Mhm. Thank you. It's been my honor. And it's just, yeah, it's always just so good to see you. I started my entrepreneur journey with you. And so it's always, I shared with you earlier that it feels like a full circle moment. And so thank you for connecting in this way.
Thank you so much. Now, I'm going to loop back and share some takeaways that particularly stand out to me. Takeaway number 1. As we're making decisions about what we'll offer, we need to get clear on what our priorities are. Dr. Rocio has some particular questions she asks herself with making any decision in her business.
Yes, it's always at the forefront of any work that I do. Is this in alignment with decolonizing? Is this alignment with doing sacred work? Is this also in alignment with me? Like, is this something that I want to do, that I feel called to do? And then also, like, does this make space for my life as a mom?
Ask yourself what your questions are going to be as you're making your next decision. Takeaway number 2. Dr. Rocio has powerful practices that reinvigorate her energy and give her a sense of purpose. Since this conversation, I've been adding more practices to my day, and I hope you're inspired by this too.
My drumming, meditation, connecting to Mother Earth, being outside and touching the land, calling in the directions and feeling the wind, the birds, connecting with them, or whichever animal ally show up, that really reinvigorates me and gives me a sense of purpose, reminds me why I'm here.
Takeaway number 3, saying no to things is necessary. If we don't say no, the impact will be felt somewhere. Dr. Rocio said no to everything non-essential during much of 2020. Sometimes we think that we can find a way to please everyone. And she points out that when we do that, the impact is felt somewhere in our lives.
Any extra things, I'm going to say no to, because I just don't have the capacity right now. I could maybe push myself and do them, and then I'm going to be tired, and then I'm going to be frustrated with my child.
And those are 3 of my takeaways. A few days after our conversation, Dr. Rocio realized there was more she wanted to share with you, and so here's a special message from her to you. And until next time, be well, and thank you so much for listening.
One of the things that I wanted to share with folks and really invite them into is that while this can be a scary time, a nerve-wracking time, because we are seeing so many changes, and that this can show up in the way that we work, in how we run our business, that it is also a time of great possibility. And so really calling them in to begin to see the possibilities, the opportunities to do things differently. So much of this time, from a spiritual, metaphysical perspective, this time has been prophesied by so many indigenous lineages. And so much of what is showing up for us is really calling us to all the things that we know are harmful, oppressive, colonial, that no longer work for us. It's really calling us in to show up, to not just become conscious of it, but also to change our behavior, our ways of relating with people, our ways of working, so that we can come into the better world, the more just world that we are hoping for, that we are envisioning. And so really from this conversation, I want folks to begin to make space for, begin to imagine, how can you in your own life, with your work, right? Work is an extension of our life, part of our life. How can you create more space for balance? How can you create more space for harmony? How can you also create more opportunities for right relationship? And I think particularly for those of us that have businesses, that really anyone that makes money and has some autonomy over that, we really need to be in integrity with making money in a way that is not oppressive to other people, hiring people in a way that is not oppressive. And really the offerings that we create, how are they accessible to more folks, right? More of our communities. How can we create offerings that are able to reach people that maybe can't afford the higher tier packages? How is the work that we're doing also taking into consideration the earth and our connection to Mother Earth? And are we honoring her and not exploiting her? And so these are all things for me that have been showing up within the last year of doing the work in a way that honors me, but also honors the folks that are called to work with me, that allows folks to work with me in several different entry points of accessibility. And ultimately, and here I also want to share the work of Toy Smith, is doing the work in an anti-capitalist way, and really not to use money as a compass, right? Because we get so caught up in how much money we need to make. And yes, of course, our needs need to be met. The business needs to be sustainable, right? Like all of those things are true. And really to be in integrity with all of humanity, with Mother Earth. If folks are really feeling called to a higher purpose of creating that better, more just world, and it must include the way that we do our work and we do our business. And so I have learned a lot from Toy Smith. I've also learned a lot over this last year from my teachers, Don Alejandro Apaza, Marilu, Shinn, of just really aligning in a way, showing up in a way that does begin to make space for the new world to show up. And so not working in a way that's exploitive for you, that's exploitive of your body, and also not showing up in a way that, is almost predatory and exploitive and is just focusing on people's money, right? Like the goal should not be, and this is different than maybe what you hear from, what I know we hear from many business practices and folks that teach business and online business, especially. The goal should not always be, can I make $1 million and how fast can I make that money? Because that comes at the cost of something that comes at the expense of people. And so really we're being called to really show up in a way that honors all folks and that also honors us, right? Not working like a machine, like a robot, and not feeling like we always have to constantly be hustling and grinding. I think that, again, is using money as the compass and not what I call the sacred as the compass. Working in that way is exploitive of others, but is also not really allowing space for your own gifts to show up, your own spirit to show up. Because when we have space, when we have rest, when we have time for reflection, the energy that we bring, right, if we do it intentionally and we show up in integrity with all the things that I'm speaking of, the energy that we bring is so much more powerful, is so much more expansive, and is how we begin to plant seeds for the new world that we are all hoping for. And so I really hope that this is one of the things that folks take away from the conversation and beginning to ask themselves those questions, examine their own life, their own working habits, their offerings too. And so if you are feeling resonance with this and really feeling called to be part of the folks that know that we cannot continue oppressive practices, that you do acknowledge that the colonial capitalist patriarchy exists and folks of color, working class and poor folks, queer folks, folks with disabilities, folks that have all of these intersections are the most marginalized and do not often have access to services that they need. These are the questions that we need to begin to create more equitable offerings. And for your work to be more than just about money, for your work to really be about the legacy that you are leaving behind and part of that new earth that we're being called to create. Thank you. Just for anyone who's really feeling that in their soul, I thank you.